Hey YouTube, Lumwest Post 1975. Question. And before you say it's too similar to a question I've asked recently, it's not. Let me explain where this is coming from. But are video games killing comics? Now, the reason I asked this is I was out with a friend earlier on today, and while we were having a tea at a cafe, he was on his web browsing super ninja phone, and so apologies if you already know this, I didn't know this, but he read to me that apparently The Dandy is going to be cancelled at Christmas. On December the 4th will be its final issue. Now, that was a massive shock for me. I was genuinely quite sad upon hearing this news. For those of you who don't know, The Dandy is a comic, a British comic that has been around since 1937. Yeah, it made it through World War II. You know, at a time there were massive shortages on ink and paper, and they were rationed, yet it managed to come out. It has a sibling comic which I was raised on and is still my favourite of the two, which is the Beano. You know, I was never really a Dandy man, I was more of a Beano boy. Actually, if you know what those phrases mean, that's actually quite an interesting statement based on class. Yeah, but don't get me wrong, it is a massive shame it's being cancelled. Now, basically it's being cancelled because it's weekly, but it only sells 8,000 copies a week now. Now, that might sound reasonably impressive for a weekly comic. In its heyday in the 50s, it sold 2 million copies a week. That's massive, you know, that's a massive, massive deal. And so yeah, I was genuinely quite upset when I heard this. Now, my friend, and he's not one to point the finger at stuff, you know, like just say it's this fault, it's that fault, because, you know, he's a gamer and he's quite up there, you know, he's intelligent, he's smart, he gets the world. Well, he said I blame video games, and I stopped and went, no, don't blame video games. He goes, well, think about it. How many kids do you know that read comics? And I thought, none. You know, everyone I know who reads comics is an adult. And then he goes, how many kids do you know that play video games? And I went, all my sort of mates' kids, and my relatives' kids, and friends, sort of, or friends' kids play video games. But then I thought, well, I don't think it's that simple. I think, like many other things, a market or something will die because they become complacent. Now, by that I mean video games have, you know, they've been around for a long time, but comics was the Dandy and the Beano. You know, I guess their fiercest sort of competition from video games would actually be in the 80s, when this new form of media kicked in, or the new form of entertainment, and they wrote it off. You know, they shrugged it off, not a problem. If you go further back, comics have always had competition from some form of media anyway, or something else, because kids, you know, kids are fickle, you know, they'll jump from one ship to the next. So I don't think it's a case of just going, it's this specific reason or this specific form of entertainment killed another form of entertainment. I think it's becoming complacent. I think it's not appreciating or understanding your market, or taking your market for granted. Now, by that I mean a few things. If you take The Dandy, right, this is a really, really old issue, but point is, what's this? This is 1981 and it's 8p. When I read the Beano in the very late 80s, it was what, 16, 20p? It's something I still buy it every Christmas. It's like £1.75 now. I don't know the cost involved in printing it, but that to me is just that's asking too much for what it is, you know, a thin weekly comic. So price probably definitely pays sort of its own hand in there somewhere. The other thing that I think is, you've got to be relevant, you've got to be up to date, whether you're just a kid's comic, you know, because one of the biggest characters in here, or their icon flagship character I should say, is Desperate Dan. He's like a, you know, over the top macho American cowboy, although, you know, obviously in the start of cutesy comics. Well, are cowboys still popular? You know, I don't think they are. I can see why kids loved them in the 50s and the 60s and even probably the 70s, because of obviously, you know, Clint Eastwood. But now, is a cowboy relevant now to kids? No, not really. I mean, to hold on to a character just because he's iconic or associated with your brand, if they're not popular, you know, or not relevant, is suicide. I mean, you've only got to look at what Marvel did with Spider-Man. After the whole fiasco that was Civil War, and obviously he got revealed, even though I'm still boycotting Spider-Man because of this, you know, and the public knew his identity, basically they just shat on their own, you know, like ability to write stories. So that's why they did the whole, you know, do the deal with the devil, and leave Mary Jane and stuff like that, and the world will not know who you are again. I don't like that they did it, but I do understand why they did it. They need to basically accept that they need to move in a new direction. I don't think the Beano quite suffers the same fate as the Dandy, because their main character is Dennis the Menace, you know, a troublemaker, a thuggish little oaf or a little bastard. While he's incredibly politically correct these days and far removed from the Dennis the Menace, I remember what's more appealing to kids, you know, a naughty child who behaves badly at school, or a cowboy from another country. Do you know what I mean? So I honestly think failure to keep up with trends is one thing. I'm not saying they should just go fickle, you know, 1 week to the next, but you can't cling to something for the sense that you've had it for 50 years or whatever, and it's what sold your comic back in the day, but it's not working. It's not working, you know. So I can see why people might think that kids are more interested in video games than comics these days, but I honestly think any form of entertainment media, you've got to stay ahead of your game. You can't sit on your ass and get complacent, because ultimately, if you don't appreciate that your market evolves and grows, then, you know, you're shit out of luck. Anyway, I'm waffling. What do you think? I don't know if you know about this with the Dandy, or just in general about modern comics. Do you think kids are more interested in sort of video games than comics these days? Do you think video games are essentially killing the comic book industry? And I'm not talking about sort of mature titles, you know. I'm talking about stuff like, you know, Dandy, the Beezer, which obviously has been cancelled for years. I'm talking that sort of group of comics that is aged at younger children. I'd really like to know what you think. Thank you for watching. I'll see you later.